What's up guys, I've got a good one for you today, especially if you like the whole rainbow confetti look. And I am one of those people. I love how this shoe looks. Guys, today we are reviewing the Skechers Razor 5. And the Skechers Razor 5 is made for those faster runs. And I would say it's even good as a race day shoe, at least at those shorter distances. But there's a little more to it than that, so let's get into it. Alright, before we get started, I do just want to say that Skechers was good enough to send me this pair of the Razor 5 for the purpose of review. However, they haven't told me what to say, they don't have any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. With that said, you're going to be able to pick up a pair of the Skechers Razor 5 for just $130. And that is incredibly well priced for this shoe. Oh, and by the way, the Skechers Razor 5 is machine washable. You know, usually you can't put your shoes in the wash, but with Skechers, you can. I think that's a pretty big selling point. Okay, so let's go over some of the specs, because I think the specs are really going to help explain what this shoe is going to be best used for. So we have 30 in the heel, 26 in the forefoot for just a 4mm drop. Now look, there's a lot of you out there that like a low drop for pretty much everything you do. I am not one of those people, but I do like a low drop when I am running fast. And in my testing of the Razor 5, that has been the majority of runs that I have put into this shoe. I've taken them out on intervals and tempo runs, and it performs very well. Now in a US men's size 9, the Razor 5 will tip the scale at 8.6 ounces or 244 grams, but in my size, a US men's size 12, it tips the scale at 10.4 ounces or 294 grams. So in my size, under 300 grams is a really solid, fast feeling shoe. Like, it's going to be light on my feet, it's going to encourage me to run faster. Now, before we get into how the shoe is made and the details and the whatnot, I do just want to talk about a couple comparables. And I actually found this shoe very difficult to find other shoes to compare it to. But I did come up with a couple, and I don't think they're ideal. They're not perfectly matched as a competitor to the Razor 5, but still, the first one I chose is the Topo Cyclone 3. Now, the Topo Cyclone 3 is a little more expensive. It'll cost you $150. And the Cyclone 3 has 28 in the heel, 23 in the forefoot for a 5mm drop. So as far as like stack height goes, we're pretty similar. 5mm drop, 4mm drop. Now, the Cyclone 3 is just a little lighter. In my size, it weighs in at 244 grams. So there's a pretty big difference. I mean, 50 grams between the Cyclone 3 and the Razor 5 it's definitely noticeable in my hands. But I would take these shoes out for exactly the same type of runs. Now, we'll talk more about midsole material in just a second when we get down there on the Razor 5, but the Cyclone 3 does have a full slab of Pebax foam, and there is no plate in the Cyclone 3. So next up, I think the Asics Magic Speed 4 is a comparable. And to me, it was a comparable for how these shoes felt underfoot. And I think this is the one that some people are going to argue with me about. But look, it's my review. I've run in both of these shoes and they feel kind of similar, which is going to be really funny because the Magic Speed 4 actually has 43 in the heel, 35 in the forefoot for an 8mm drop. So overall, we've got 13mm more stack height in the heel of the Magic Speed 4 over the Razor 5. Now, the Magic Speed 4 weighs in my size, at 289 grams. So that's just 5 grams less than my size in the Razor 4. But with that said, this is a size 13, this is a size 12. So take that for what it's worth. Also, the Magic Speed 4 will cost you $170. And look, again, we're going to talk about the Razor 4 more when we talk about the ride. But the Razor 4, it doesn't ride firm, but it also doesn't ride soft. I think they really thread that needle and they have a very nice feeling foam. But the Magic Speed 4, to me at least, rides a little firm. And that was the reason, like the ride kind of reminded me, because it's so firm, it reminded me of a lower stacked, faster shoe like the Razor 5. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts if you agree or disagree with my comparing these two shoes. Anyway, let's get on with it. And we'll start at the top and work our way down. And of course, look, got a lot of padding around here. It's not too much. This is a fast shoe, but there is enough padding to make this very comfortable when you put your foot in. The Razor 5 has a very stiff heel counter, which is good. I didn't experience any heel slip in this shoe. And there is a removable arch fit insert. So if you needed to change it out for something custom, you can certainly do that. But I did just want to draw your attention. I don't know, can you see that with the light? Underneath the sock liner is the same colorful confetti colorway as the midsole foam. That's pretty good. I thought that was somewhat of an Easter egg. Maybe I'm just easily impressed. As you can see from the design, it is very simple. There are very few overlays. In fact, this SKX here on the side is actually just part of the upper. They haven't overlaid anything onto it. We do have a little bit of reinforcement coming along the eyelet chain, and then there is an underlay coming around the toe box, and the upper is a nice engineered mesh. It's very breathable. Oh, I also am a big fan of this SKX branding on the side. Oh, and if you're interested, that is the Skechers symbol on the New York Stock Exchange. Of course, I had to go in and see how Skechers has performed. And look at this. Over the last 5 years, Skechers is up 53%. That's pretty good. Okay, back to the shoe. Now we do have that extra lace loop in case you needed to do the heel lock method. I definitely did not have to do that on this shoe. And onto the tongue. And the tongue is probably my favorite type of tongue on any kind of running shoe. And that is, it's a thin, almost race-like shoe, but there is some padding in it. So it's like strategic padding, but very thin padding. But that thin padding is more than enough to stop the laces from biting into the top of my foot. The tongue is not gusseted and we have a single lace loop right on the front. All in all, no issues with the tongue. So let's come down to the midsole. And the midsole is, it's more than just its good looks. Right? Oh, and by the way, I get it. Not everyone is going to like this colorway. The Razor 5 is available in some more traditional colors, but trust me, all the cool kids have this. Oh, and if you're interested, this colorway is white multi. And I've got to say, I was pretty disappointed to see the name of this colorway. Like, I wanted it to have something to do with rainbows or unicorns or nerds. Like, it's just too cool to just be called multi. Anyway, maybe that's just me. Okay, as I said, the midsole is more than just its good looks. It is Hyperburst Pro. And Hyperburst Pro is a supercritical TPU foam. It is light and it is responsive. It is exactly what you want in a shoe that is, wow, made to go fast. Okay, but I think now is a good point to kind of stop and back it up a little bit and tell you that this shoe is just not made to go fast, or not just made to go fast, I should say. Because even though it does perform very well at speed, if I hold it up, you can see, can you see that? Like the hyper arc rocker is just very pronounced. In fact, if I put it on the desk here, you see how smooth that rocker is? Just rocking from heel to toe like that. Like, that makes the shoe perform very well at all speeds. So no matter where you're landing, and you're probably landing further back if you're running slower, maybe a little further forward if you're running faster, the Razor 5 just seems very smooth. At least it did for me. Now, I do have to tell you that I was also a fan of the Razor 4, so I certainly wasn't surprised that I liked the ride of the Razor 5. But it just feels smooth no matter what speed I'm running at. Now, the reason I said that this shoe is really not comparable to the Topo Cyclone 3 is that there is a 4-foot carbon-infused H-plate. But it is just in the forefoot. My first impression was that I didn't notice that it had a plate. So the plate wasn't so pronounced that I was getting, let's say, plate fatigue. You know, when you run for a long time in a shoe, sometimes just a really stiff plate kind of wears you out. You get tired from it. But because this plate is just in the forefoot, like when my heel hit the ground and I rolled through my gait cycle, I didn't have that rigidness of the plate all the way through. But I guess the plate in the front is just giving you a little more snappy toe off, like when you actually toe off. But what I'm thinking is that the plate and the foam and the rocker, they all play together to build on this ride that I actually enjoy. So I probably shouldn't say that I didn't notice it. I noticed it, but it wasn't really the only thing I noticed in the ride. Does that make sense? And when I bend this shoe up, like you can see, it's not the most rigid plate. Like I can still bend that up like that. In fact, the heel is almost the heel is almost less flexible than the forefoot, and there is no plate in the heel. But that's probably also because there's a lot more foam in the heel. Anyway, that's not based on any kind of science. That's just me bending it here. But it's a pretty flexible shoe, even where there's a plate. Okay, so let's just come down to the outsole, and the outsole is absolutely phenomenal. Skechers is using Goodyear outsole rubber, and there is a lot of it. It's a fairly thick piece of outsole rubber here on the heel, this side of the heel too, small cutout here in the middle, and then a lot of forefoot rubber. And guys, if I look at it, it's looking really good. Like, again, it's looking almost new. Tiny little bit here on the heel, and just a very little bit of scuffing up here on the forefoot, but it's very minimal scuffing because I can almost see like the little lines, the tread on the tread. So just based on my visual inspection of running, I don't know, over 50K in the Razor 5, I think it's going to last above average. Okay, so now let's talk about something that I don't like. Well, it's not something that I don't like, but I think it's something that a lot of people aren't going to like. And that is, well, you already know, I have fairly narrow feet. And the Skechers Razor 5 is a fairly narrow shoe. And I would say that this shoe fits me quite well. However, like, sometimes our feet change shape, like they can swell just a little bit, and sometimes they get a little less swollen. And I did notice that on a couple of runs where I took out the Razor 5, I could actually feel my little toe pressing into the outside of the toe box here. Now, the only time I felt my little toe touching the outside of the toe box was when I first put them on. When I started running, like, it wasn't noticeable when I was out running, so that wasn't something that I ever continually thought about on the run. But a couple of times when I put them on, it was noticeable. Of course, more times it wasn't noticeable, but that does tell me that people with wider feet than me are probably not going to like the Razor 5. In fact, if you do usually buy wide shoes, I would say just steer clear of this because it is very narrow. I mean, it is more narrow than Nike, it's more narrow than Adidas. It's probably the most narrow shoe that I have. In fact, it reminds me of Salomon shoes like several years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. Salomon used to have a very narrow toe box, and that is kind of what it's reminding me of. Of course, if you didn't run in Salomon shoes 5 years ago, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but just trust me when I say this is a very narrow shoe. So it's really only for narrow-footed runners. So overall, if this shoe fits your foot, for $130, I think it is extremely well priced, and I think it's extremely well rounded, as in like what you can use the shoe for. But if you don't have narrow feet, then it's a non-starter. And unfortunately, I tend to think that most people have wider feet than me. I don't know what makes me say that. Maybe it's based on my comments that I get on my videos, because people only ask about shoes like how wide they are, not how narrow they are. But anyway, I gotta say, bravo to Skechers for making a really solid shoe at a solid price point. I mean, that's kind of what Skechers is known for. It was the same with a Razor 4. And I know for a fact, after going to TRE and seeing what Skechers has coming, we're all in for a treat. But for now, it's Matt V. This has been my review of the Skechers Razor 5. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.